So it all starts with a trail. I think we can agree that if animals were on the earth before humans, that they made trails. And as humans came onto the scene, we followed those trails to find those animals and to hunt them for our survival. And we used those trails later for water and to find medicinal plants and to also go to new places. And eventually those trails also led us to new people and join different communities and villages, as mentioned earlier before. And as people evolved, our modes of transportation also evolved. As humans started to ride horses, hiking trails or walking trails became horse trails. And horse trails became carriage roads. And carriage roads, as we developed automobiles, carriage roads became dirt roads. And dirt roads became gravel roads. And gravel roads became 2-lane paved roads. And paved roads became 3-lane highways. And 6-lane highways and 12-lane highways. But let's not forget, it all started with a trail. So let me see a show of hands, another pop quiz. Show of hands, how many people in the audience drove here today? Okay, how many people in the audience rode a bike here today? How many people walked here today? Well, hey, that's not a survey to find out who's our most green person in the audience, okay? I'm just trying to make the point that we all have something in common. We all got here on a trail. Because at one point, a lot of our roads and our highways were actually trails that were used by indigenous people. And so now, where are these trails? A lot of them have disappeared to overdevelopment or what they call development sprawl. But the trails that are left, how do they serve us? What service do they provide for us? And a lot of people don't know some of these things, but for the scientists, they allow a never-ending venue of discovery. And for indigenous people, they allow the ability to maintain their culture through gathering and through spirituality. And they allow access, remote access to resources so that we can protect endangered species and stop wildfires. I've actually seen a trail stop a wildfire. Trails also inspire artists and allow them to imagine so that they can come up with their own impressions. But I think what we most recognize trails for is they allow us to play. Hiking, biking, horseback riding, backpacking, romancing, fishing. I think in addition, I have a list too long to share with you today, but we know now that we can use trails also for meditation and also for reconnecting or rehabilitation. I think we've learned that today. So if trails can do all these things, can they help solve our modern day problems? Of course they can. It all starts with a trail. I'm with Jamie Oliver. I think we have a serious overweight health problem in this country, and I think it needs to be addressed now. And trails allow us to get out and exercise. Therefore, in addition to eating healthy, I think we need to get outdoors and exercise more. Also, in addition to that, trails also allow us to collect organic foods for subsistence. They also allow us to be in touch with nature. They maintain a non-stressful environment full of peace and quiet. And I think that most importantly, that they connect us back to nature. For I fully believe that being connected to nature or being out in nature makes us better people. And so I think that a trail makes people generally better. Okay. I want to introduce you to Ohia Tree, my friend Ohia Tree here. I want us to understand for a second and take a second to understand that this is the only piece of nature that we have in this entire room. Okay? So, therefore, it's the closest that you are to nature right now. And because this tree, I think what's important is that we understand that we're so displaced from nature that for some people, the closest that they get to nature is a plastic tree in their office. So I think that if we all had more trees that we brought today, more trees and plants, that if we filled up this whole stage, that I would actually have a whole forest in behind me, and it would make this presentation even better. So let's have a hand for the tree. So I think it's important that we get people really into the forest. Or as I like to call it, get the city to the forest and the forest to the city. And so how do we go about doing that? How do we get the city? I think what we've seen today is a lot of different ways for getting the forest to the city. Okay, and there's a big movement for this, and I think this is what's behind our City 2.0, and that is that we're using types of nature to our city, and there's a movement going on right now to where we want to make our lives more livable and our cities more livable by introducing things from nature like rooftop gardens or like city beehives or backyards, chicken coops, or even open spaces or greenways. And so these are all things that make the forest come to the city, and it's a big movement, and a lot of people are talking about it today. But my talk today is more about bringing, no matter how good we make our cities, that we still have to get people out into the forest. And because that's what we're trying to bring to the city, so why not get the real stuff and go out to the forest? But I mean, I do want to make a point real quick with that, and that is that even though we want to redesign our cities and make them more walkable and more bikeable, I just want to point out that this is the 2003 Hawaii Bike Plan, and here we are 10 years later, and nothing, I can blow the dust off of that. So how do we get people out into the forest? And I think that's from the city out to the forest. And for me, starting with me, I think it all started probably as a toddler holding on to my father's finger or bouncing around in a baby backpack out in the forest. But I know that it was my introduction to nature at an early age that made me fall in love with nature. And it all started with a trail. And that same trail brought me to this very moment on this stage in front of you talking about a trail. So I think the first thing we need to do is we need to get our children and our youth more out into the forest. And I think we can all agree that this is a good thing. Now, it's real easy, right? Turn off the TV and take your children outside, all right? Now, if you can't do it yourself, there's nature centers and nature programs for children out there. Use them and support them. Another way to enjoy nature is to maybe go on a tour. Okay, there's eco tours all over the world. Don't be afraid of them. Go and use them. They're fantastic. They cost a little money, but it's a safe and friendly way to get out into the forest. And also, if we do create our City 2.0 and it had greenways in it, we could connect the greenways from our new city to the trails outside of the city to get people more out into the forest. Okay? But is that enough? I mean, what about if we got a little bit more creative and added more new ideas? Some of these ideas are already out there. So let's say we started to make sculpture trails. What if we made sculpture trails to help get people out into the forest and more interested in it? Just imagine for a second. Well, first of all, I'm currently working with the National Park Service to create a sculpture trail here in Honolulu. And the idea is that we get artists out on the trail to create sculptures along the trail, whereby we take pictures of those sculptures and take them into city galleries or into museums, whereby people in the city can see those pictures, see that they're sculptures out on the trail, and then go out on the trail to check them out themselves. Okay? So that's maybe one way to do it. But what about looking towards like technology? I mean, technology we use all the time to solve a lot of our problems. So how can we use technology to get people from the city and out into the forest? Currently, or what I see a lot, is people are on their phones all the time, especially young people. You can't go by a bus stop in this town and see kids on their phones all the time, right? So how can we get people to use their phones out in the forest? Well, currently in Makiki, there's an interpretive sign program called Nature Calls, and whereby it has these signs that have phone numbers on them. And you call the phone number, and it gives you information about the history, geology, and geography of the area, okay? So you just call it up, and there it is. But what if we took that one step further? Or what's great about that program is that it also gives you that information in multiple languages. Okay, so for our visitors from other countries, they can actually learn more too. But we could take this one step further by with what I call QR trails. And this is where we put QR codes on different posts out in the forest at different points or locations of interest, and whereby you have an app on your smartphone that tells you more information about what you're looking at or of interest of the forest, or even messages of conservation. So this is one way. Another way is what if we made our interpretive signs a little bit more interesting with apps on smartphones? Currently, we took a survey, and we found out that a lot of people who use our trails actually don't read a lot of our interpretive signs. So what if we made them more interesting? What if we made them so that they interacted with people or were able to be more interesting with an app on your phone? Let's say, for instance, you put the phone over an image, and that image actually came to life and showed you some type of interesting information, let's say like a species that's in the stream. So this is what you would see on your smartphone. See, now wouldn't that make that sign a little bit more interesting? I think you'd actually have to stand in line to see this sign if you did that, right? So that's one way. Another way of technology right now is called geocaching. Now this is nothing really new, but geocaching is kind of like a treasure hunt out in the forest. And so what it does is it allows people to put caches out in the forest, and then other people try and find them with their GPS. Now let's see what's going on here in this picture. I see a family out in nature, they're exercising, and they're learning and working together towards a common goal. So this is a fantastic idea, and I think some of the things that I've already talked about help get people out onto trails and therefore out into nature. And I think that this is really important. I think that by doing this, you're kind of getting people out on the trail, or as my friend Matt in the audience says, Matt, raise your hand, there he is, that he calls this a modern-day breadcrumb trail. And it's true, and this is what we want to do. So, which leads me to my next point, and that is, or my next idea, which is not a new idea, it's an old idea, but it's a good one, and that is getting out and volunteering on trails. I think volunteering is a feel-good, healthy way to get out and make our trails better and also friendlier for other people to enjoy. So I want to take this time to invite you all out to the forest with me. Not right now, you can sit down. But eventually you can come out in the forest and help me make some of these ideas come true. I think that by doing that, we can work together and make our world more livable and better. And of course, it all starts with a trail, right? So what's our next trail experience? What's ahead for us in the future? Can we look to space for our next trail experience? What you see here are the tracks left behind by the astronauts of the Apollo 17. So, in conclusion, there is signs of life out in space, and it all starts with a trail.